Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on our live stream. Yes, you can watch us live online. We are live streaming on cbc.ca/BC, on the CBC Gem app, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Love for you to join us there, or on radio as usual. Up first today, how are wildfires affecting BC tourism? We'll speak with the Wickaninnish Inn and ask you, have your travel plans been disrupted by wildfires? After 12:30, we're also introducing a new regular pet segment on the show. We'll be joined by a dog trainer taking your calls on your puppy problems and dog dilemmas. I'm Michelle Eliot. This is BC Today. First up, though, hundreds of residents in Maple Ridge are out of their homes days after a building at a nearby construction site went up in flames. The fire happened Friday night and burned for roughly 10 hours. CBC's Zara Premji joins us now live. Hi there, Zara. What do we know about what happened?
Yeah, hey, Michelle. So, you know what? I'm going to start off with what you can actually see behind me. And for those who are listening, what we can see at the back is basically a charred development. About 3 floors over there, just completely done. As you said, this happened on Friday just before midnight. Went into the next morning, 10 hours of blazes burning. It went over this development. The fire then went over to the building over next door. We actually just met with someone who said, I live in the corner place. She's about 87, I believe, or husband 91. She shook him awake. They left everything behind and they ran. So what we know right now is they're still trying to piece together what caused this, and it's still very, very, very early, Michelle.
For those residents, what's been the impact since?
You know what? I'm going to tell you about a positive thing that we just got to experience moments ago. We actually saw the son-in-law of one of the women that lives inside. She had to leave. Her place got flooded because obviously water mains burst, everything. It was chaotic on Friday night. Mother-in-law ended up at their house at 2 in the morning saying, I need to stay here. She had to leave her canaries behind. She breeds canaries, didn't know if they were going to be okay. Imagine today's Monday. Those canaries had not eaten since Friday evening near midnight. We got to watch their rescue today. We got to watch them coming out. Canaries were just chirping away. So excited. I know, right, Michelle? Like, it was an exciting experience for us to be here. We got to see that they're going to have their new step sibling, a little puppy, going to be living with them temporarily. It's going to be a full house, but we got to see that. And so, you know what? The residents we've spoken to, their family members, no one's just sitting here saying, why me? You know what they're saying? I'm so lucky. So many people have expressed this excitement that I got out. It is an awful situation, but I got out. There were no injuries reported. This is phenomenal to hear that for such a widespread impact when you said, right, hundreds are out of their home.
Wow. And nice to see that bit of hope, right? That moment of hope that you got to witness today. What's the latest on the investigations are?
So we've reached out to the city, we've reached out to fire, still early, it's still about noon, of course, so we are waiting to hear back. They did say they will update us at some point today, so I will have that for you a bit later on in the day. What we do know right now is we were out at the front, we did see restoration workers there. You know, you can smell it, the air is pungent still with the smell of fire. We're walking, you can see the ash everywhere, you can see it falling still, you can see it all over the ground. It is still very much an active scene here right now, and I think they're still trying to figure out what to do with everything. We did hear from one of the residents, so we don't know if this is going to be happening right now or later, but they are going to be pumping out one of the garages where the cars are parked, and of course water leaking through.
Zara, good to have you on the story today, and as you said, thankfully no injuries. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Michelle.
10 minutes past 12 o'clock now, past 1 o'clock in the Mountain Time Zone. This is BC Today here on CBC and online as well. You can watch us live streaming on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page, on CBC Gem, as well as on our website, cbc.ca/BC. Well, on to the wildfires now, and the latest update from the Transportation Ministry on Highway 4, which was closed, of course, due to a nearby wildfire. And Highway 4 remains closed at Cameron Lake Bluffs, with a detour in place for commercial vehicles and people who must travel. Assessments are underway to monitor the danger of falling trees and debris on the highway and to assess slope conditions. At this point, no estimate regarding timing for the reopening of Highway 4 on Vancouver Island. Well, the disruption from wildfires is making its mark on tourism operators in our province. Some business owners say the smell of smoke and the threat of flames has kept many visitors away in recent years, and that is having a profound impact in an industry that was already hit so badly by COVID restrictions. So with the province now saying we're about a month ahead of where we might expect to be in this wildfire season, British Columbians are once again bracing for a summer of challenges. Well, we want to hear from you on your own summer plans. Have your travel plans been disrupted by wildfires? Are you taking a second look at your travels in BC in light of wildfire activity? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, on your cell phone, star or pound 690. You can send an email to bctoday@cbc.ca. Well, one of the regions that's impacted right now is on Vancouver Island. The closure of Highway 4 at Cameron Lake has made travel very difficult, and from the tourist hotspot as well of Tofino. Charles McDermott is managing director of the Wickaninnish Inn, and he joins me now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you with us, Charles. What's been the impact on the Wickaninnish Inn?
Well, we've seen a number of cancellations, of course, and the highway, the detour route is really for essential travel.
Mm-hmm.
But I will give my hats off to Harbour Air and Pacific Coastal Airlines that do fly into our area and have increased flight schedules and expanded capacity, which has made a difference because we have a number of our guests that are already booked on these flights, and then additional guests that were planning to drive that have changed plans and chosen to fly instead. But that still means we're about half the normal occupancy that we would normally run. So we're running around 35% to 40% at the most.
Wow. What does that mean for you, 35-40% of your usual business?
Well, it definitely means it's a lot quieter than we normally expect this time of year. The beaches are open. There's very little traffic in Tofino in terms of visitors, of course. I think we're fortunate to have a few more that do choose to fly in. But we're still fully staffed and still ready to go for the summertime and maintaining our full staffing levels for the time being. And we're expecting to, hear a bit of an update from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure today.
Yes, and that update just coming in that it does remain closed at this time. I guess you're watching that pretty closely, aren't you? And what's it like to sort of be, on the edge of your seat, wondering when it's going to open?
Well, that's true. It's something obviously we can't control, but having grown up in Tofino and been used to sometimes occasional closures. We're still a very small town at the end of a long road. These kind of things, our pioneer spirit here is strong. We take them in stride, and frankly, all essential services and needs are coming in. So that's not really a concern. It's more of a challenge for residents who need to have essential travel outside of Tofino. But again, the airlines have stepped up, and we have pretty good access that way.
And Charles, we're seeing an impact every year now because of wildfires. How are businesses in Tofino, coping with the uncertainty that each year presents?
Well, we're fortunate that in general, certainly on the very west coast here of Vancouver Island, I would say we're not typically impacted by fires, even like the Cameron Lake fire that we're seeing this year. Of course, the future may hold more of that and likely will, but right here on the edge, we don't see that many impacts. Even the smoke and so on, we're typically this time of year, we do have the prevailing winds are from the west, so our skies do remain clear, and we don't really get impacted too much from the smoke that other parts of the province have to endure. So that's a positive from our perspective. But we need to plan for future considerations like this. It's definitely a drier time, especially as we now have moved into an El Nino period from about 3 years of a La Nina kind of weather patterns. So that's changing, and I think we're seeing that impact right now.
And what's it been like for your business to recover from the COVID-19 restrictions?
Well, I can tell you that last year was our busiest year ever
Ah,
in 2022. This year it's a little bit quieter because more and more people are traveling abroad. But we're also seeing a return to more normal travel patterns where we have strong visitorship from Europe and from the US. And that those would be our along with, of course, strong Canadian travel. Those are our primary markets in the summer. And we're seeing that pattern kind of return to the norm, more like 2019, the last pre-COVID year. So things are starting to return to normal, a little bit, derailed temporarily with this fire, but that's what we're seeing for the future.
it sounds like you're just rolling with it. Any advice for people who might be traveling, who have plans to travel to Tofino?
Well, we, as along with the ministry and ourselves, we're not recommending travel on the back roads. That's primarily for essential travel. It's still it is accessible and people can travel that way, but we're really not recommending that. And I would say the best option for those that want to come to Tofino right now is booking airline flights through Harbor Air and Pacific Coastal Air, and they put on extra flights. So there is some additional capacity, and yeah, it's beautiful in Tofino right now. The sunshine is there, the beaches are empty, and lots of space in the restaurants. So if you want to come, now is a great time.
Yeah, people might be envying you for being stuck there right now. Charles, good to speak with you. Thanks so much. All the best.
You're very welcome. Thanks for checking in.
Charles McDermott is the managing director of the Wickaninnish Inn. It is 12:18 now, 1:18 in the Mountain Time Zone here on BC Today. We'd like to hear from you as well. What are your travel plans like, and have they been disrupted by wildfires over these past few years? Are you taking a second look at your holiday plans in BC this summer? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, on your cell phone, star or pound 690. Well, let's head to the eastern part of the province now, the southeast. Revelstoke, one of the many communities that's been touched by the impact of smoke and wildfires in recent years. Megan Tabor is the marketing and destination director of Tourism Revelstoke, and she joins me now. Good afternoon.
Hi, how's it going?
Fine. Thanks for joining us, Megan. What's been the impact on Revelstoke from year after year of wildfires in BC?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely seeing the impacts in the summer. Luckily, so far this year, we've only had about one day of smoke, but previous summers for sure. I think what we're noticing specifically is people maybe just delaying booking their travel in the summer and just wanting to make sure that potentially the areas that they're going to holiday in are going to be smoke-free when they have those like precious time of year off, essentially.
Yeah, what are you finding? What are you observing in terms of how people are planning? Has that changed?
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, I hear from my accommodators specifically that it seems like this summer is a little bit slower on the early booking side of things. So people are maybe just waiting a little bit to make sure that it's going to be smoke-free for their holiday. And so that's obviously impacting business, not knowing what their bottom line is going to look like by the end of the summer. Mm-hmm. They don't have a good idea of whether or not people are actually going to be traveling here this year.
What does that mean for them? What's been the impact on them from that?
Well, we're coming off kind of two challenging COVID years. I was just listening to the gentleman from Tofino. So it definitely impacts our businesses in terms of hoping to recover from COVID. And then now we're kind of seeing the impacts of wildfires in the summer as well. So yeah, definitely challenging for specifically small business owners.
Yeah, I can imagine. I remember going to Harrison Hot Springs a couple of years ago and hearing people say, "Oh, we came from from the from the Kootenays trying to escape the smoke there, and so that was a concern for them. But when it comes to just a part of BC where perhaps right now you're not affected by wildfire, is there an impact from just the BC brand when prospective visitors might just be thinking, I'm going to BC, I'm making plans to visit British Columbia, but I hear there are wildfires?
Yeah, 100%. I would say that's probably the most negative part about forest fires for our sector is kind of all of the media and PR around BC being on fire. So when you hear about BC's forest fires, a lot of people who are maybe not from the province assume that the whole province is burning and that all of the areas are affected. But I think obviously the reality is that different areas are affected at different times. And it can vary even day by day, depending on wind direction and whatnot. So it's a big part of the impacts on our industry is really the hype around forest fires in British Columbia. And that media, kind of the media around it too. So I think the education and trying to encourage people to keep traveling is definitely something that we do summer after summer, just so that people know that, maybe we aren't actually affected by some of the wildfires around the province.
And for the businesses you were talking about, especially those small businesses, what's it like for them then to plan ahead?
It's really challenging, especially with staffing shortages. We see that in the summer specifically. So, if businesses aren't maybe anticipating as busy of a season, then potentially they don't have the staff that can support the influx of tourism when that does happen. I mean, we tend to see a lot of visitors come through in the summer regardless, but oftentimes it's that last minute traveler or they're just staying one night. So that really impacts our businesses from a staffing perspective.
What does that mean for the local? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it also impacts the visitor experience, which is really what we're trying to preserve here.
Right. Those the staffing challenges and all of that. What's been the impact on the local economy then?
The impact on the local economy, I mean, it's definitely been severe when we get those smoke seasons. I would say more often than not, it impacts us further down the line. So potentially that one fire season that's really smoky may not have a huge impact if people have already pre-booked or they're already planning on coming and they've already kind of allocated that time to visit. But we're definitely starting to see the effects more in the future. And like I mentioned, more so than ever this year, I think anecdotally, we're just seeing that lack of kind of earlier bookings. But yeah, typically it doesn't necessarily impact the season. That's really bad for smoke, but it will impact kind of future seasons along the way.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for giving us this update. Good to have you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks.
Megan Tabor is the Marketing and Destination Director of Tourism Revelstoke. 24 minutes past the hour now here on BC Today. Well, some exciting news from the world of golf this weekend. Abbotsford's Nick Taylor won the Canadian Open yesterday in Toronto, becoming the first Canadian man to win at home since 1954. And what happened was 22 holes of golf filled with highs and lows and a stellar putt at the end of it all. Taylor's short game golf coach, Gareth Refleski, and his father-in-law, Phil Dodd, spoke to CBC's Stephen Quinn on the early edition about Taylor's career-defining putt.
He's a pretty good player as it is, I think he said in his interview it really helped him because one of the putts that he had was on a very similar line, obviously a lot longer. So he kind of knew what it was going to do. And, once he hit it, it was a really slow putt because the rain was coming down. So It was actually very, very tricky. So he got all the calculations right, and a bit of lady luck on his side there, knocking it in was even more nice to see.
Well, yeah, and it looked like it had quite a lot behind it, and so he hit it that hard because the turf was wet.
Yeah, and it's uphill and it's sliding. It's that green is diabolical. Like, it really is a really tricky green, and that's the defense of the golf course. The greens are very, very tricky that week. So, luckily his putter was on hot form that day, and yeah, it was just sweet to see that one go in.
And now, Phil, what was it like for you watching that putt?
Well, pretty amazing. But if you hear what Nick said about the putt himself, he you sort of knew what the line was within the last 15 feet or so. But, just as Gareth said, like, really what you're looking for is, just to get it really close. And that thing just had a perfect line and even perfect weight for that matter. So it was just unreal that it went in.
27 minutes past the hour now here on BC Today. And yes, welcome to our viewers who are watching us live streaming as we launch that today on CBC Gem, on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page, and on our website as well, cbc.ca/BC. As always, you can listen to us on radio, CBC Radio 1, 88.1 FM in Vancouver, and online, cbc.ca/BC. You can use the CBC Listen app as well. Lots of ways to connect with us. There you go. Good to have you with us, whatever way you are watching. And as we launch our BC Today on live stream, today we're also launching a new segment. It is the launch of our new Pets column, and it's going to be airing every couple of weeks. We know there are a lot of pet lovers out there in our listenership, and today we are focusing on dog behavior. Whether you're new for a parent or you've had pets your whole life, you know it's not always easy to train your best friend. So we are taking your calls right now on your puppy problems and your dog dilemmas. You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. On your cell phone, it's star or pound 690. You can also email your question to bctoday@cbc.ca. I see some questions coming in already. And joining me with some tips about how to communicate with your dog is professional dog trainer Sarah Shapiro-Ward with When Hounds Fly. She's with me here in studio. Hello.
Hey, Michelle. It's nice to be here.
It's very good to have you with us. How did you get into dog training?
Oh, it's kind of a long story, but
Okay.
I always loved dogs, and that's kind of the crux of it,
Yeah.
Sometimes you just fall into what you are passionate about, and that's definitely for me.
When you're lucky, right? You take a science approach to training. What does that mean?
I sure do. Well, my original career was in science. I was a postdoc researcher at UVic. I did biochemistry.
Wow.
So I have that science background kind of in me, so it just made sense that when I switched career, I would carry that over.
How does that apply then to dog training?
It's a lot of observation, and it's a lot of knowing what's in the literature and basing your approach not just on like that kind of feeling, but actually what's been proven. So lots of psychology concepts apply to dogs, and we leverage those to help train our dogs as well.
Wow. What are some of the most common questions you get?
Oh, there's so many things like, do I need a backyard to have a dog?
Right.
Is a really big one.
And do you?
No, you don't actually. And I think in Vancouver, that's a really important thing to know. Having a dog and going out and hiking, and it's such a perfect place for a dog, and you don't necessarily need a backyard. But yeah, I have tons. People ask me all sorts, so I'm looking forward to seeing what comes up today.
I think people will have lots of questions for you. I think whenever we talked about pets here on the show, our phone lines just start lighting up. I can see Jillian and Harrop just outside Nelson waiting with a question right now. Jillian, will go to you first thing right after the CBC News update. Thanks for calling. And we are joined by Sarah Shapiro-Ward, who's a professional dog trainer, taking your calls on dog behavior, your questions. And we'll go to them right after this CBC News update, as it is 12:30 now, 1:30 in the Mountain Time Zone. Here now is Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. The BC Wildfire Service says a firefighter on Vancouver Island was injured over the weekend while battling the blaze burning across the steep, rocky slopes above Highway 4 east of Port Alberni. The firefighter was airlifted for treatment and their condition has not been released. Officials say the incident highlights the danger of trees and debris tumbling onto the highway. Crews have been unable to contain the huge wildfire north of Fort Nelson as gusty winds forced the evacuation of an additional 14 properties. Residents were ordered to leave last night due to the lightning-caused Donnie Creek fire, which has scorched more than 4,000 square kilometers. And a Vancouver family is donating $20 million to St. Paul's Hospital for substance use treatment. The money from the Diamond Foundation is in memory of Steve Diamond, who died from an opioid overdose 7 years ago. And now the forecast, a severe thunderstorm watch is in place for much of the Kootenays. On the north coast, mainly cloudy this afternoon with a high of 13. Highs reaching 22 with widespread smoke in the Peace. In the central interior, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 28. Highs reaching 31 with some sunshine and risk of thunderstorms in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, sunny with a high of 32. And here on the south coast, lots of sunshine this afternoon with highs reaching 27 inland. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Michelle with BC Today.
You want to give a wave to our audience? They can see you now.
Hi. And to my cats at home, I know it's a dog segment, but hello to Blackberry and Stripey.
Oh, there you go. And we'll make sure to get a cat expert in one day.
Fantastic.
For you to just write your questions down.
I
get
could
ready.
use some help. I have some.
Oh, dear. Okay.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people do. Rob, thank you very much.
Sure.
And the people can see you now. Look at that. How exciting.
Yes.
For everybody. Maybe not for you. Shy guy, Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. This is BC Today here on CBC Radio 1. Also live streaming now, of course, on our CBC Vancouver YouTube page, on CBC Gem, and online cbc.ca/BC. Good to have you with us, however you are joining us. And we continue now with our pet segment that we are launching today. Very exciting here on the program. And we're taking your questions on, yes, dog behavior for today. We'll get to cats one other day, perhaps in a couple of weeks. But for now, we are talking about dogs, and all you dog lovers out there, do give us a call with your questions for Sarah Shapiro Ward. Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733. On your cell phone, it's star or pound 690. If you prefer to email, it's bctoday@cbc.ca. And Jillian is joining us from Harrop. Jillian, thank you so much for waiting.
They're having me on.
Well, tell me about your dog and what your questions are.
We have a bit of a dilemma.
Uh-huh.
We have a farm dog, Abby. She's 2 years old. We've had her since she was 10 weeks old. And I would have described her as an outdoor dog, full of energy. We have chickens, ducks, and rabbits. And she is out there protecting them, and she grew up with them. And something started killing our animals, and Abby would be running up to the barn area and barking and barking and barking, interfering with what we thought was a bird of prey, although we didn't see it. We have lots of eagles around where we live. And Abby's behavior suddenly changed. She had a lump on her head, a hole in the top of her head, which we assumed must have been that she was dive-bombed by maybe an eagle who pierced a hole in her head, which healed. But psychologically, our dog changed instantly.
Oh.
She now is hiding in the bedroom. She hides in the toilet. She hides in the bedroom. We have to put a leash and collar on her to take her outside. We can coax her outside with food, but it's almost once she's outside of the house, she's looking up at the sky, and you can tell she's fearful. So we tried everything. We've tried only having her outside with us when we go out. So when we go out to sit and have our dinner on the patio, we take her outside with her. When we do the chores, we take her to do the chores. But she seems normal for a few minutes, and then all of a sudden her eyes go up to the sky, and she wants to go back in the house.
Oh.
And we don't know what to do.
Yeah,
we tried leashing. I've tried walking around the farm with her on a leash attached to me, so that I'm hoping she feels safe. But it doesn't seem to be getting any better, and it's 3 weeks.
Oh, dear. You must be so distressed, Jillian.
Yeah, we're trying everything we can possibly think of.
Yeah, it sounds
We've
like
run out of guesses.
Well, I can see Sarah here nodding as she's listening to you. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have quite a few thoughts.
Oh, good.
It's just such a it's such an unfortunate situation, and especially because you're doing so much for this dog and trying to make her feel safe, and that's so nice to hear. But yeah, sometimes traumatic events like this can change your dog's behavior. The very most important thing, though, when we have sudden behavior change, so if something happens really rapidly, the most important thing to do is get the all clear from your vet first, just because sometimes if there is pain involved, if something has happened, the pain can cause behavior changes like this, and that's something that your vet really needs to clear first. But absolutely, if something happened that's caused her to become afraid, that can change her behavior as well. And there are some training approaches that we can take to help. And the really big one, and it's probably going to sound kind of silly, but it's trick training. Trick training,
okay.
Trick training boosts a dog's confidence by having them do a specific task in order to get a food reward, usually. So it doesn't have to be complex tricks, but something like going over and touching a button or picking up an item to retrieve it, interacting with their world a little bit more can improve confidence. And so for a lot of dogs who are struggling with their confidence, what we recommend is sort of training a trick, basically, indoors until they're really good at it and they're really kind of proud of themselves and confident doing that trick. And then you would take that game or that trick outside and rehearse there in those spots too. Because she is frightened, you would want to keep your exposures to the outside world really short, especially in the beginning. So you think about your dog's comfort zone is quite small. Just push that comfort zone a tiny bit and then go back to safety of home. And then a little bit more as she's ready. But doing too much at once, often they just kind of...
Too much.
It's too much and they just sort of escalate. So yes.
Yeah. Trick training. How does that sound to you, Jillian?
Actually sounds like something I absolutely will give a try.
Thank you. Good luck to you, okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah.
No problem.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for the call. And that's Jillian joining us from Harrop. We're taking your questions about dog behavior to professional dog trainer Sarah Shapiro Ward, who joins me with When Hounds Fly. Taking your questions here, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. On your cell phone, star or pound 690. That sounded like really good advice, Sarah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I can see that working. Build the confidence over time. Exactly. Nancy is our next caller now in Kelowna. Hi, Nancy. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
What's your question for Sarah?
Well, I have two dogs, Norwich Terriers, and one is a year and a half older than the other, and he seems to, I don't know if it's a correction thing, or when the younger one, his name is Reggie, is playing with other dogs, the older one chases after him and bites him and barks, and he doesn't bother the other dogs, just his brother. And at one time when we would cross the street, after we got to where across the street, he would attack his brother. And I figured that one out by shortening his leash. He's bossy. And that's corrected it. But this playing and him attacking his own brother, I don't understand it.
So sometimes we call this the fun police behavior. Hopefully I'm right in getting the picture in my head. But your younger dog is playing with his friends and they're having fun, and your older dog comes in to break the fun up. So it's not that the younger dog and the older dog are playing and then he's correcting. Is that what the picture is?
That's correct.
Okay.
You got it.
Okay, cool. So sometimes cool, not cool for some people. Sometimes, but yeah, this is being kind of nicknamed the fun police, I guess, in dog training, which is kind of a cute name for it. But sometimes, so it can happen for a number of different reasons. Sometimes the older dog is overstimulated, so they're just kind of too excited and they don't know what to do with that. So they are a little bit inappropriate in joining in the play. And then other times the older dog does not like the play and they want everyone to just calm down. So they rush in and they just stop the play. So that's why they're kind of policing the fun.
Right.
In those kinds of situations, usually the best thing to do is just treat it as though the older dog does not want to participate. which may or may not be true. You'd have to delve a little bit deeper to know. But what you can do is you can sit on the sidelines with your older dog and watch for him watching, because he'll probably at some point go, oh my goodness, what's going on over there? And you'll see his little ears prick up.
Yeah.
You'll see his little ears prick up. And at that moment, what I want you to do is I want you to give him a treat. And it's going to sound really counterintuitive, because you're going to think about, reinforcing behaviors that you don't want. But actually, when you think about it, if he's watching these two dogs play and he's learning, when I see the excitement level rise and I want to interrupt, actually what I can do instead is go look at my person and receive a treat. So what happens after a while, instead of deliberately going in and breaking up the fun on his own, he's going to look at you and be like, hey, parents, what are you going to do about this? Are you going to do anything? And so he'll check in with you first before he'll go and interrupt. So basically you're pairing, and this is different from the psychology, this is classical conditioning.
I love it.
But you're pairing the sight of that play happening with your dog receiving a treat. So he's learning the association, and that's going to change his behavior over time.
Wow, you're blowing my mind right now.
Fabulous. You're really?
Yeah, it just sounds so logical.
It's easy when you know the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Not always intuitive. If you
No,
don't.
I never would have thought of it on my own, though. Nancy, does that sound good to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give it a try. Thank you very much.
Pack those treats. Thanks so much for the call.
I will. Thank you.
That's
Bye
Nancy.
now.
Bye-bye. Nancy in Kelowna, taking your calls to Sarah Shapiro Ward, a professional dog trainer with When Hounds Fly, and lots of questions coming in already. Our numbers, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email to bctoday@cbc.ca, and we are getting a lot of questions by email writing that they are neighbors to yappy dogs. Is there anything they can do to mitigate that?
That is a really good question, and not the angle that I'm usually exposed to, because normally it's the dog owners and not
yes,
the
these are the
neighbors.
neighbors.
But I have a lot of sympathy for non-dog owning people who are exposed to kind of nuisance behaviors like this. So I do genuinely feel for a lot of the non-dog population of Vancouver, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on. But the main thing for people who live next to yappy dogs is to let the person know so that they are aware. One of the big problems that I see is separation anxiety, which is when the person leaves and then the dog fusses for a long time. And sometimes the person doesn't even know, because in the first 5-10 minutes after they're leaving, the dog is fine. The dog then realizes the person's out, and so they start crying and barking and fussing, and then they sort of wind down and tire themselves out. So when the person gets back, they maybe don't know about what's been going on. So in order to have this problem rectified, the person who owns the dog needs to know that it's the problem, so that they can handle it. In terms of mitigating the problem, there's really not much that neighbors can do unless they're actively involved in the dog's life, which is kind of unlikely. So unfortunately, other than informing the owner and maybe even your building, so not all people, realize there's a problem and go out and fix it. Sometimes they need a little bit of a nudge,
Maybe they're so used to it, right?
Exactly.
Like, as you say, they're away and they don't hear it. They're
So
out.
letting the building management know as well can kind of light the fire under to get it sorted, which, is a good thing to do.
All right. Maybe cover your ears. Get some headphones, earplugs. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. George is our next caller now in Mackenzie. Hi, George. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
What's your question for Sarah?
Our dog just constantly growls. He's 17 years old, and we've been told that he might have Alzheimer's. And he's coughing quite a bit. I'm just wondering, and I've also read that he might be in some kind of pain. He was hit by a car years ago.
Poor guy.
But he's had x-rays, so they said that was all good.
Yeah, so he's growling. Can you tell me a bit more about the growling? Like, when you touch him, or?
No, he just sits down on the floor and growls.
Okay.
There's nothing around. He just growls.
He just growls. That's not something that I've seen a lot of, and it's definitely something that I would advise you talk with your vet about, because your vet will have a more developed toolkit for dealing with the kind of physical side of things. And it definitely appears to be it sounds to me like a physical thing. Dogs don't typically do behaviors for no reason when we're training. But what I will say is, vets are great. They're amazing. They do so much for our dogs. And one of the things that they can do is they can do something called a pain trial, where they will basically give your dog some pain medication, and if it helps, that shows that there's some pain, and if it doesn't help, then it's maybe not pain and we need to look into it further. But that's the first thing that I would do, is go directly to your vet and see if there is some kind of pain going on, because that seems like it could potentially be likely.
Yeah, we had him in a vet there a couple of years ago for an eye issue, and he did scans and blood work on him. Mm-hmm. And he said he looked healthy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So maybe delving a little bit deeper into the pain trial. Sometimes, you gotta push the issue a little bit if it's not resolving on its own. So it's definitely something that I would look at again, because that doesn't sound like a behavioral issue, so to speak. It sounds more like a medical issue to me.
Hopefully there's not too long of a wait to get into your vet, George.
Because he looks perfectly healthy. He's bouncing around and running around.
Right. Well, good luck to you, okay? I guess, I hope you can get in to see your vet soon. Thanks for the call.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, all the best. Bye-bye. George in Mackenzie now. Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. We have another barking question now from Tom in Vancouver. Hello, Tom.
Hi there. Yeah, I live in an older house in Kitts, and we've got two Nova Scotia duck tollers in the house. They're actually both from the same litter, so brother and sister. And it seems that they set each other off. If one of them sees something or the other one hears something, they start barking, and then it's a bit of a battle to try to get them to stop. Just wondering what the best methods for curbing barking behavior.
That's a really good question. When you asked what the most common question I get, actually, this is probably the one. So this is called alarm barking or alert barking, when your dog sees movement or hears a sound outside the house and they start barking towards it. And the reason why it's such a big problem is that we chose this in our dogs. Historically, we bred dogs that would alert us to strangers, and it would make us feel safe. And now it's a problem. So that's it's just an interesting bit of trivia. That's why it happens. We brought this on ourselves. So dogs are kind of wired to do this. It's kind of a big part of their personalities. Like, that's why so many of them do it. And it can be really difficult to overcome, especially when you have two, because they do tend to feed off each other. I have two dogs as well, so I know this quite well. So there are two main ways of approaching this, and both are good, and I would do them together. The first way is to intentionally make noise outside that you can train towards. That's quiet enough that your dogs are going to hear it, but probably not going to bark towards. So for example, I've had people hang dog tags outside their window. So some dogs bark when they hear a dog like jingly dog tags walking by.
Oh, yeah.
So you can have like a little jingly sound outside your window, and then your dogs hear it and they go, it's probably not a big deal, and they sort of desensitize to it. Or you can have your friend or something go outside your apartment, stomp around a little bit. And if your dogs are quiet and they're not responding, you can praise them and give them a treat and tell them they're doing good. So that's one way of doing it. It's a little bit more work intensive, because you have to set up a scenario where there's a sound that they can cope with outside, and then you're training inside when your dog is being calm. You're basically teaching them to relax and not respond. But of course, it's not an easy way, because here's the thing. We tend to not think about it until it's a problem. So we're sitting there watching TV or, listening to the radio, and then our dogs are barking to a sound, and then we go, I'm going to deal with this now in the moment. So one of the main problems that we have in positive reinforcement training, where we're using treats, is, do we reinforce barking when it's happening? So if our dog is barking, what can we do in that moment? Now, the best thing to do in that moment is teach your dog to do a different task, and then receive a treat for that task. So if you hear a sound outside, go sit on your mat, and then I will give you a treat. Or if you hear a sound outside, go, run over and touch me in the hand, or sit next to me, or whatever it is, teach a task, and then give a treat for that task. What does happen is, in the beginning, you will hear a sound, your dog will bark, and then they will do the task that you've trained them, and then they'll get the treat. But as they progress, what should happen over time is they'll hear the sound and then they'll want to do the task more than they want to bark at the thing, because doing the task gets the treat. So the barking gets shorter and shorter. So we call that a behavior chain, when one thing happens and then there's another behavior and then there's another behavior. And if there's not any value in the barking, they're not getting food for it, they have to do the second part. Usually you only get 1 or 2 barks, and then your dog does the second part to get their food reinforcement. So going and sitting on a mat is a really good option, especially because you can have one for each dog. So the sound would happen, your dog would bark, and then you would teach them to go over onto their mats. You'd have to do that separately without any sounds present first, and then you would give them both a treat for sitting there. And you should find the period of barking shrinks until it's just basically 1 or 2 barks or just a little woofle, and then your dogs are out. Now that's easier to train it that way, but you will still always, or not always, but usually you'll still end up with a little bit of barking left over, which is why the other method is sometimes preferred, having people make noise outside that you can train your dogs to stay calm in. So there's not any like one method. There are different ways of dealing with it, with this, but these are the 2 that I typically use.
Sound good to you, Tom?
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks for your help.
Thank you for the call. Good luck. Here's a question too. We're heading into travel season, so people are leaving and perhaps they can't take their pet with them. How do you prevent that separation anxiety you were talking about?
That is such a great question. And unfortunately, there's not really a good way of preventing separation anxiety in the moment. You have to spend some time building up to it. So before travel season, ideally, months before travel season, the first thing you should do is assess whether your dog does have separation anxiety, because they might not. You might be okay. Best way to do that is a trial with a pet sitter. So get to know the person who's going to be looking after your dog, and do a half day or even a full day trial. See how it goes. If there's not a problem, there's not a problem. If there is a problem, then depending on what that problem looks like, you may have to do some work. So hiring a trainer for one-on-one lessons. Separation anxiety is quite a big problem to overcome, and it requires a lot of gradual desensitization or exposure to that feeling of being left alone. So you need to give yourself a good 6 months to be able to really accurately and comfortably deal with that, which is tricky. But yeah, so a trial with a pet sitter and then take it from there. If you need further resources, look up your local dog trainer because they can help.
There you go. Preparation is key. Andy is our next caller now in Kelowna to Sarah Shapiro Award, professional dog trainer. Hi, Andy.
Hi.
What's your question?
So my question is, I have a Great Dane who is 6 years old, and my son is 5. She seems to think that my son is her baby. So she gets very protective. She's very protective if she walks with me and my son is there. My husband can walk her and she shows no sign of aggression, no sign of overprotectiveness. But if I, for instance, am walking with my son and her and there's a dog, she's very unpredictable. She won't let a dog get within 5 feet of my little boy. And she can come off like quite aggressive, which, she's 135 pounds. It's not great.
Yeah, especially when you have a large dog, these kinds of behavior problems are sort of magnified because your dog is, they're just bigger and they're scarier. Hefty. Yeah, exactly. If you had a little Chihuahua, probably no one would bat an eye.
No, I mean, if it's biting at your ankles, it's one thing, but when she's, she can pick a dog up pretty quickly, and it's really unsettling. And she's the sweetest. But I don't really know what to do about it because it's reached a point where I'm afraid to walk her with my boy.
And that's really unfortunate. That's a shame. There are quite a few things that we can do to help, but most of them are actually fairly complex. And I would advise that you go through a one-on-one private trainer to get eyes on what exactly is going on. But typically, so this sounds, and it may not be, but it sounds to me like a problem that is called resource guarding, which is when your dog feels like they have a resource to protect. And so people approaching can often trigger this kind of aggressive response. Now, it may not be resource guarding. It may also be what we call leash reactivity, which is when your dog is on a leash walk and they are aggressive towards other dogs. So we would have to kind of determine the difference. Either way, though, when we see aggression, especially in a big dog like this, especially around kids, we would do very controlled setup training where the dog is safe in their comfort zone. Everyone's safe. There's management in place. So we might use a leash, we might use a muzzle. And we just like the other dog that's afraid of going outside, we just push that comfort zone a tiny amount. And then we make that dog feel safe and feel good. So it might involve, someone with a dog really far away, just showing up and then leaving, and then showing up and then leaving, so that your dog kind of is able to start tolerating this. Now, the reason why I suggest working with a professional is because it is quite nuanced. And if you get it wrong, you can sensitize your dog rather than make it better. So sensitization is when the exposure of the threat, the dog coming over the hill, seeing too much of that can actually make the behavior worse. And something that I always like to explain to people, because it makes sense when you know, if your dog is aggressive and the other dog goes away, that is basically your dog feeling good about their behavior. Their behavior of aggression resulted in the consequence that they wanted, So the threat came in, your dog barked or lunged or snarled, and the dog went away. So your dog is starting to learn that aggression keeps everyone safe. So our main job to do is to reverse that association and help your dog feel that they are safe and they don't have to aggress, which is, it's tricky. So that's a tricky one that I really do think needs professional eyes on it.
Okay, so have someone take a look then. Andy, thank you very much. I've got one email here that I'm going to put to you in the last minute here. Sky and Renato ask, what are the best steps for successful introduction for a 1-year-old reactive and barky Pomeranian to our 18-year-old cat?
Oh, that's a good one.
In about 30 seconds, if you don't mind.
Oh, okay, sure.
What do you think? What's the best way to introduce the 1-year-old reactive?
In 30 seconds, sorry.
My apologies.
I didn't understand. Outside, lots of space, no pressure. So really easy, really fun, no pressure to play, just hang out together, basically. This is your first introduction. Just go out and chill in a neutral space and see how they do. That would be the first thing I would try.
That's great and succinct. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. I just wanted to squeeze it in because that email came in quite early on in the program. Sky and Renato, thank you very much. BC Today at cbc.ca. Wow, Sarah, you are just a wealth of knowledge.
I do my best.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you for answering all of these questions.
Oh, no problem. It was really fun.
Such great detail, too. Really good answers. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sarah Shapiro Ward is a professional dog trainer with When Hounds Fly, and she'll be back with us on the program as well. We'll rotate guests depending on the pets that you'd like to talk about. That's it for our show today. Thanks so much to everyone who called in and joined the program and watched us live online as well, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Listen app if you'd like to listen on GEM as well, and on YouTube. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks for watching and listening. Have a great afternoon.